All right, all right, all right, all right, all right. Let's get it. Let's get it. Let's get it. First things first. Welcome to CNN. I'm your host, Kurt Kennedy. Let's go in. On this channel, we take no part in the unfruitful works of darkness, but instead expose them. All right. First of all, shouts to all the people who made comments, just encouraging comments. I didn't post my last video about I was done doing everyday posts because I was felt disconnected from the way I normally post and the people that I usually get with in the chat. And a lot of encouragement came in. I lost 6 subscribers, of course, but a lot of encouragement came in. I appreciate that. I wasn't posting that video for that reason. I was just deciding, like, you know what, I really said it because I didn't want people to say, oh, I thought you was going to do 100 days. You know, when you say something, you got to keep your word, right? Make it yes, yes, and your no, no. So I was turning my yes into no. That's why I said that. But I really appreciated the encouragement and the comments, and I appreciate the subscribers that left too. Y'all don't know what you're missing. All right. So I got a member of my church sent me a link to a video. Now, I had seen this video in my feed on YouTube, but I didn't click on it. I think when I saw it, it was like coming soon. But this person, member of my church, sent me a link to a video of Lecrae interviewing Eric Mason. Now, I've known both of these guys over the years. I have not kept in contact with them. I've known Lecrae since back in the day, you know, going backstage at concerts and hanging with them dudes and all that. And then E Mace, I've known of E Mace and known E Mace for a while, but I haven't been in touch with them dudes in forever. So I saw them. I don't know. Plus, I look different. I got the dreads. I look like a chubby Melly Vanelli reject. So anyway, I watched this video and I had some thoughts. I had some thoughts about this video. And I know a lot of people would. And I've seen some people say some things already about it on Facebook. Mostly like, oh, check this out. What do you think? What do you think? And there were some things that were said in the video that I thought were really good. And it kind of brought up some stuff for me that made me remember a few things. So this is what we're going to do. I'm going to put up, I want to show, I hope, you know, this is the thing with the copyright stuff. Sometimes when you do copyright stuff, you get in trouble. You know what it is? Maybe the bigger channels don't. I feel like I get in trouble. So hopefully I don't get a copyright infringement for using this clip. I'm going to try to speed it up just a little bit, just in case they try to hit your boy over the head with a, you're not supposed to use that type of vibe, right? But I want to just show you a couple excerpts, not too many. I just want to show you a few excerpts from this particular video. And I thought it was a good interview. So just so you know real quick, I thought this was a good interview. I appreciated what both these brothers had to say. There were some things that made me be like, And then it brought me back to stuff that Eric Mason said something in this video. And he wasn't saying what I'm going to say, but he made a point that I felt like largely explains what's happened the last 10, 12 years in the church and what the real issue was. I've talked about this at different times over the years, but we're going to get into this, all right? We're going to get into it. You know what I'm saying? Let's get it. Here we go.
No, that's white people. That's the white man telling you. It's like, no. The Christian faith can critique my black culture.
Yeah. It has room to do that.
It has room to do that.
Yeah.
And that's not white people. That's God, the true and living God. And if God says something's off limits, it's off limits. I'm not going to try to make voodoo or hoodoo redeemable.
Yeah.
I'm not going to try to make. Now, if someone uses medicine that cultures always knew naturally help you, I'm gonna take some lion's mane mushroom pills. That don't mean I'm gonna put some bones out and say rah, 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 you know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? But I'm gonna take milk thistle. I'm gonna drink matcha. I'm gonna use sage and different things. But even if I burn sage, it's not gonna be because
you're worshiping.
I'm worshiping. So I got the name of Jesus for that. That's easy.
This is a scent.
This is a scent that God created. If
I push the hot button with that one,
I got a crystal on one of my hats, and my wife was like, babe, I don't know. I said, babe, God made this crystal. I said, let's go to Revelation. Let's look at the priestly garment. I said, topaz and onyx and all of these different things. Yahweh made these as things to beautify the new Jerusalem. So I can enjoy this, but I don't believe that there's incantation and infused power or some type of vibration that's on this crystal. This is my God created this, and it's a decorative piece. So yeah.
So, all right. So listen, life does not happen.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about this. Now, I came into the clip a little bit late, but in this clip, like in this particular interview, this interview started off with them talking about the movie Sinners, and Eric Mason talked about being a fan of like vampire movies, and Lecrae was like, "Yeah, me too, Lost Boy." And this is what I'm about to say is not what I'm going to talk about the whole video. I just thought this was an interesting point because it's interesting how at the clip we just watched, he's referring to the movie Sinners, and the movie Sinners it was a vampire movie, but it was about black culture in the Deep South. Back in sort of Jim Crow days, and there was like voodoo and something called hoodoo and all of that. And I thought it was interesting that the emphasis. Now this isn't the main point of what I want to talk about. This is a sidebar. This is to get y'all ready for the real stuff I'm getting ready to talk about, right? I thought it was interesting that voodoo was an emphasis, but vampires weren't, right? Now I'm not here to tell people all their stuff and what you should watch and what you shouldn't watch. But here's what's interesting though. I thought it was funny that I agree with Eric Mason that some of the backlash for the movie Sinners was more about hoodoo and voodoo and I get it because we live in a particular area where witchcraft is the new thing, right? It's the new reality. But here's the reality though. Like in the Bible, right? God warns from Leviticus up until like all through the New Testament, like, do not eat blood, right? Because the life is in the blood. He forbid the Israelites to eat blood. I just think it's funny that people will focus on like, oh, the black experience. Why are they talking about stuff where they woke or this or that, or there's voodoo, but you think God is glorified by watching vampires. Like vampires eat blood, fam. They blood suckers, right? They TV show True Blood. It's all about eating the very thing that God forbids. So I just thought it was funny that people will get nobody's beefing. When Twilight came out, nobody cared about vampires. Oh my gosh, this is a love story. These are vampires, fam. These people can't even be in the actual sun because they'll die. So they can't be in the sun that he created, and they can't be around the one who created that sun, right? Now, granted, my point is that like it's so weird how people latch on to stuff like ain't nothing redeemable about vampires, not at all. But that's not even what I want to get to, right? He had mentioned like burning sages and crystals and stuff like that, and he was saying how some people react to that. And Lecrae was like, "Oh, you touched a nerve with that one," something like that. And I realized as he was talking, I understood what he's saying. I got his point 100%. I got what Eric Mason was saying. I think Eric Mason loves the Lord. I'm not one of those people who are still bitter at him because he woke church and somehow think that he's woke. I think he loves the Lord, man. And I think his desire is that people love the Lord, right? But when he said that, here's what I thought. I thought, because this was coming, it was a lot of other things said before that, but it was this point that made me realize, part of what happened, one of the challenges in the church, modern church right now, is we all have a very narrow view of how we evaluate if something honors the Lord or not. And this is what Eric Mason was not saying what I'm about to say. All right, let me just make that clear. So if he sees this clip or Lecrae, I'm taking it in a different direction based upon what I've seen, knowing some of these things, right? I was behind the scenes for a lot of what was happening in the modern evangelical church for the last 12 years, 14 years. But Eric Mason was bringing up a point about, he was saying, this ain't sinful, this is simple. And his wife was like, you shouldn't have a crystal in your hand. He was like, look, this is in the Bible. And how do you, and then Lecrae was going to ask a question like, how do we parse that out? And they didn't really get into it as deeply as I'm about to in a second. But I realized something, that a lot of what has happened in the church, even how we've become so politicized, right? There's like such a syncretistic political perspective, which I've historically called theological. All of this stuff. What all of this is because we have a very narrow view on how we imagine what's biblical or not. So here's what most Christians, listen, there's 4 ways to evaluate things biblically, at least 4. There's maybe more than 4, but let me give you 4, right? I feel like people don't have this category, right? So here's the first one that most Christians think, and this is what we saw all through And it was very well. I'm gonna get to that point. I was about to jump ahead. I'm gonna come back to that. All right, we evaluate, is something sin or not? Is it sinful or is it not? That's the primary way most Christians evaluate. And I think this is a very faithful way. Here's what Romans 6 says, right? It says this. What then? Are we to sin? Do not present your members to sin as instruments of unrighteousness, but present yourselves to God as those who have been brought from death to life, and your members to God as instruments of righteousness. So it makes total sense, right? We are evaluating, is it righteous or unrighteous? Is it sinful or not? That is a very biblical way to evaluate things. But here's the problem, though. That is, in many ways, the only way people evaluate. And it's not always that clean. This is the reason why Romans 12 says, discern what the will of the Lord is. This is why 1 John 4 says, test the spirits, right? It's not always that clean, fam. But what happened was, and this is what I saw happen, and I'm going to get deeper in this in about 10 minutes, right? But what I saw happen was everything was about this is unrighteous or righteous. It was sin or not sin. But what it became was preferential sin versus preferential sin, right? My preference of what sin is, that's a good way to evaluate, is it sin or not? But that's not the only way. And when you only have that way, you miss something incredible about the Bible, and you miss an opportunity to work with people, to have fellowship and to trust the Spirit, the Holy Spirit, right? So here's a second way that the Bible gives us, right? There's another way. Is it lawful or not? Is it lawful or not? The Bible says some things are, the Bible calls it lawful, but it's essentially saying, is it beneficial? Like, here's what it says. Look, all things are lawful for me, but not all things are helpful. All things are lawful for me, but I will not be dominated by anything, right? So he says, and then he says in 1 Corinthians 10, very similar language. Let's go there. 1 Corinthians 10, let's ease on down the road. What y'all know about the Wiz? What y'all know about the Wiz, right? What y'all know about the Wiz? Right, where is this at? He says, all things are law. Here it is, right here. All things are lawful, but not all things are helpful. All things are lawful, but not all things build up. Let me tell you why this is important. Because what he's saying, this is Paul saying this. Paul is saying, this isn't sinful. Now, there's a context. I'm not saying he's saying nothing is sinful. I'm making it principle, right? I'm going from contextual to principle. He's saying there are things that are not sinful, but they're not beneficial. There are things that are not sinful, but they don't build people up. They're not building people up. There are things that are sinful, but I don't want to be mastered by anything. They're not sinful, right? This is a category in which we have to learn. Is this lawful or not? It's not just, is it sinful or not? It may not be sinful. It may not be beneficial, right? People didn't think like that. And what I saw happen was the church only has, is it sin or not? And you don't have other categories. And so you're calling things sin that may not be sin. And this destroyed the church. You'll see what I mean in a second, all right? The third way that the Bible tells us to process. Is it wisdom or foolish? That's the whole point of the Proverbs, right? Wisdom or folly. Wisdom or folly. That is not sin or not sin. There are things you could do that are unwise, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's sinful, right? It could be unwise, right? It's just not a wisdom to do. Look at this in Ephesians 5. Watch this right here. Look at this bad boy. It says, look carefully then, how you walk, not as unwise, but as wise, making the best use of the time. It says the days are evil, right? It doesn't say being unwise. There are times where we're going to make decisions. That's not a wise decision. Let me give you an example. Let's just say you need to make a little bit of money. You need to make some change, right? Times is getting tough. You know, we thought Trump was going to lower all the prices of everything, and stuff is creeping on up, right? The tariffs are kicking in, right? So now you need a little part-time hustle. You get a little part-time job because you're trying to, but all of a sudden you're tired, and now you're not able to go to your small group at church. Or maybe your part-time job is requiring you to miss a couple Sundays at church, and you didn't count on that, but you needed the money. So now it's not like if you miss a Sunday at church, you're going to hell, but it just wasn't. And then you realize, oh man, I'm not able to fellowship. This wasn't a wise decision. It wasn't sinful. It just wasn't wise, right? That is a category we have to think about. If it's only sin or righteousness, imagine that. Telling someone you're in sin because you needed more money, you didn't trust the Lord, and you took a job, and now you've missed a couple of meetings. You've missed 2 Sundays a month. You're in sin. I don't know if that's what the Lord would say. I would say that probably wasn't wisdom, right? It was unwise, but it wasn't necessarily sinful. It was lawful, but it wasn't really beneficial. It wasn't sinful, but it's not building you up in your faith because you got to miss, you got to work. This is a category that is important that many in the church miss. Here's another category, right? Maturity versus influence. Let me explain what I mean by this, all right? By maturity, in Romans 14 talks about not binding someone's conscience, right? But he talks about it from the standpoint of one person having a stronger conscience than the other, right? And this is what he's saying. He's saying, look, there are things that your conscience will allow you for, and you know they're not sinful. But he says, but don't bind your brother's conscience, right? So look at this. Therefore, let us not pass judgment on one another any longer, but rather decide not to put a stumbling block, right? For I know and am persuaded in the Lord Jesus Christ that nothing is clean in itself, but it is unclean for anyone who thinks it's unclean. For if your brother is grieved by what you eat, you are no longer walking in love, right? So the point that he's making here is like, look, your conscience is good. I can do that, but don't allow your conscience to do that, right? So he says, do not for the sake of food destroy the work of God. Everything is indeed clean, but it is wrong for anyone to make another stumble by what he eats, right? The faith you have, keep between yourself and God. Blessed is the one who has no reason to pass judgment on himself for what he approves. There is a way that you influence people, right? When you are mature, you influence people, right? And you're going to be around people who have different standards of maturity. If you make it just sin and righteousness, then you'll be like, I'll never forget this, right? So I knew a guy who struggled with lust a lot. So he had a good friend of his would go work out at the local gym. And he would go with this friend, but he would wait outside because he didn't want to see women. And one day his friend was like, hey, why do you not go in? And he said, because women in there and I don't want to give them the lust, right? And then they had this conversation about should he go to the gym or not. He was saying, look, there's women in there. And he wasn't trying to bind his friend's conscience, but he was almost saying, man, you shouldn't work out in this gym because there are women in there. And he was like, yeah, but I don't struggle with that though. Now, the guy who was struggling was single and the guy who wasn't was married. And he was like, look, if I struggle, I got a wife I can go home to, but we can work that out, right? So there's about maturity and you influence people, right? So those are other ways that the Bible talks about. This may not be, I may want to serve my brother. Now, what he did end up saying was, look, when you're with me, I just won't go to the gym because I don't want to be a stumbling block for you. But I'm not going to not go to the gym because you struggle with it. I'm just not going to go to the gym when I'm with you, right? That's the biblical principle. This is what God is saying. And this is what got decimated throughout the history, the last 12 years. Let me tell you what I mean. And some people will get offended. And then, here's what I don't get. The people in my comment section that get the most offended at things I say are usually people who are proponents of free speech. Fam, if you agree with free speech, then why are you offended if I talk about something that you don't like? It's free speech. I'm doing what you're fighting for, what you stand for. But never mind. Nevertheless, I digress, right? Let me tell you what happened briefly over the last few years. And then we're going to go a little bit deeper in a second. The church still hasn't really recovered from all of the woke versus anti-woke, stuff. The anti-racist versus the church hasn't recovered from the Black Lives Matter to all that stuff, right? There was so much drama that happened. And so much of it was really just only evaluating things that were said, whether they were sin or righteousness. That was it. This was the first one. Is it righteous or unrighteous? If I think what you're saying is unrighteous, it's sinful. Right? There weren't other categories to evaluate. So it was just, is it sin or not? Is it sin or not? And people started accusing each other, hating each other, arguing with each other because in their minds, because I disagree, it's sin or not. It got to the point where, and some of you may feel this way now, it got to the point where people who could be really close, who had different political positions, now all of a sudden, who you even vote for is a matter of sin and righteousness. And people start saying, no Christian would vote this way, would support what this is doing. This is white supremacy. No Christian would vote this way because you support baby killers. All this stuff started happening, and it was like, whoa, hold on, slow down, fam. These people love Jesus. This person loves Jesus. They may not be wise. This may not be a wise decision, but it doesn't mean it's sinful. And I watched this destroy brothers and sisters because all most people had was this filter, sin or righteousness, the one right there on the screen. What about, is it sinful or beneficial? Hey, it's not sinful for me to do this, but it might not be beneficial, right? It might not be wise, it may be foolish, but it's not sinful, it might not be wisdom. If I decide I'm gonna go down, listen, it's not sinful if you decide you're gonna walk down into a dangerous neighborhood and count your paycheck as you're walking down the street. And you get robbed. That wasn't sinful. It was unwise, right? That wasn't sinful. It was unwise. I think what would be sinful is praying and driving with your eyes closed. I think that's sinful. That's not just unwise. That's stupid, fam. You will be with the Lord quickly after that, right? My point is this. I watched, even today, so many Christians have this idea. This is why you can't even have a difference of opinion from someone without them being offended. I'm old enough to remember what agree to disagree meant. No harm, no foul, bro. We just disagree. But because things are just sin or righteousness, and I'm talking about believers, I'm not talking about the world, believers. Believers are arguing, is it sin or righteousness? Is it sin or righteousness? That's sinful, that's not. And it's like, fam, it's not sinful. It might not be beneficial though. It's lawful, but it's not beneficial. People didn't think like that. It could be an influence of a maturity. Hey, it's not mature. I'm a little bit more mature. I can listen to secular music and not want to imitate their lifestyle. I can watch a movie that has gratuitous violence and not try to decide what gun I'm going to buy next and who I'm going to shoot up, right? Is this, and this is the point, this is kind of what Eric Mason was getting at in the interview with Lecrae. He was getting to this point. But a lot of times what's happened is when you only have the category of sin or righteousness, you don't have lawful or beneficial. That's not about sinfulness. That's not wrong to do it, but it might not be beneficial. Or that's not wrong to do it, but it might not build people up. Well, I might have a bunch of Christians over my house, right? I was with a couple buddies of mine last night. He was talking about some stuff. And I'm their pastor. These are my friends, but I'm still their pastor. And these are some of my closest friends. So I'm free to be myself fully around them. I don't live a double life. I'm not sinning, but I might joke around and be humorous with them in ways that I wouldn't with other people if they were there. And the main reason why is because they may have an impression of, this is my pastor and I expect him to be a certain way. Remember when the Ark of the Covenant came back? Remember this? And David started dancing. He was getting it in. Everybody's talking all that stuff about God. Why? He was going in, cabbage patching and all of that, right? He was doing a whop, boom, boom, boom. And then his wife, Michael, was offended. She was like, the king of Israel was just dancing and showing his butt. And he was like, man, what you talking about? The Ark of the Covenant is back. I'll get more undignified than this, because in David's mind, the presence of the Lord was here. In Michael's mind, you the king looking like an idiot, right? This is what's happening. So there are times where I might not act this way because it's not sinful, but it might not build up the people they might think, man, Pastor Kurt's being really silly. I'm not used to that. So with my close friends, I'll be that way, right? But that doesn't make it sinful or unrighteous. There are other ways to evaluate as Christians, and we just have dumbed it down to sin or righteousness, and we bind people's conscience. We do exactly what Romans 14 says not to do. You bind people's consciences and make them think because it's something for you. Romans 14 does say this. I will say this. Here's what Romans 14 does say. Let's be honest about that. Here's what it does say. Look at this. Verse 23. But whoever has doubts is condemned if he eats, because eating is not from faith. For whatever does not proceed from faith is sin, right? So you have this category. Is it sin or righteousness? Remember, the righteous will live by faith. Is it sin or righteousness? If you don't have faith to do it, then it's sin for you to do it. The Bible does say that. But what I saw happen in the church, and it still happens to this day, this is what the enemy did. He dumbed down and made it just sin and righteousness. And so everyone would say, oh, that's sinful. Oh, you don't support Black Lives Matter. You say all lives matter. That's sinful. That's sinful. Oh, well, you're complaining about race stuff, so you're woke. And it's like, Slim, what are you talking about? This stuff also, it was incredible to watch this play out. And it still happens to this day. It's do you know how they say you shouldn't talk about politics or religion in the workplace, or you can't talk about politics from the pulpit? What Bible verse is that, fam? I don't know what Bible verse that is. You talk about whatever you feel like the Lord gives you to talk about to your church, right? But this is what happens. So it's sinning. So as I was watching this video, I thought, man, you know what? I just don't think we think about how to evaluate things biblically. We just don't. We just think sin or righteousness, and that's it. And we call things sinful that are not sinful, and then we do damage to a person's conscience because it's sinful to us. It's not beneficial. It's unlawful to us, but it's not to them. It's foolish to us, but it might not be. It doesn't mean it's sinful. I personally wouldn't do that, but I mean, all right, it's between you and the Lord, and that's what Romans is getting at. And this is what I saw, what I feel like damaged the church considerably. And I think it still has, to be honest. All right, let's go to the next thing that I felt like they said in this interview that I thought was really interesting, all right? So let's pull it up, and here we go.
This music.
Yeah.
And I'm not analyzing it. It's not like I'm being influenced by it. And it was like, I got to leave it alone.
Yeah.
You know, but now that wouldn't be the case. I can listen to Mary J. Blige and I'm just fine.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't tell you to,
Right.
because you got to know where you are with the Lord.
Yeah.
So
I think we have to. My only thing with people, when they demonize anything or call it fundamentally flawed, you just got to be consistent. Apply that consistently, fam. Don't like pick and choose.
Can't work for Nike.
You can't go see sinners and denounce the fraternity. You can't. That's hypocritical to me.
Yeah.
You can't go to Starbucks.
Yeah. The siren.
You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm saying if you're going to be consistent in it.
Yeah.
Don't like pick and choose what your obedience looks like when you utilize these principles as these things being fundamentally flawed. You can't even use the dollar bill if you you got to use all debits. Like, use credit cards and debits, because the dollar bill is full of occult symbolism. So I'm just kind of like,
that's true.
So is your transaction with money an incantation? Is it the mark of the beast? I mean, like, I can keep going with this.
Hey, let me say this too. This is a sidebar. But Eric Mason's laugh had me crying. I love his laugh, bro. That dude had me crying with his laugh. But let's talk about this. This is the real issue that I wanted to get to. And this would, to me, summarize modern American Christianity and what happened with the whole woke versus anti-woke thing. And I'm going to speak from kind of both sides here, because I was behind the scenes when it first started, right? And there was an inconsistency epidemic that happened in the church, right? Let me explain what I mean. And people got offended. People took the inconsistencies became sin or righteousness, right? And there wasn't grace going on both sides. Let me explain what I mean by this, all right? So around 2011, Propaganda dropped an album with a song called Precious Puritans, where he was telling white pastors, when you talk about Puritans, it offends me because, Puritans and slavery and things like that, right? And a lot of evangelicals blew up, got offended. White evangelicals got offended. It became a thing. And then guys like Thabiti, this is how it all started. Let me tell you how this all started. Well before like Mike Brown and Black Lives Matter, this is how it all started. Propaganda did a song called Precious Puritans. You can Google this. You'll find, like, back when Thabiti was writing with Gospel Coalition, he was trying to go back and forth explaining things to people, and all this was going on, right? Prop did a song called Precious Puritans. White theologians were loving rap back then. Yours truly, helped contribute to that when I rapped at John Piper's Church 2006, shameless plug, new album coming out in the fall, right? But all of a sudden, Thabiti felt, because he's writing for the Gospel Coalition, let me explain to you what Propaganda is saying, because people were getting offended, right? And then Thabiti alone was going back and forth with it. And then some other guys like Anthony Carter chimed in. I think E. May started to get involved a little bit, just trying to help, like, hey, listen, we've been to your churches. We've been a part of it. We've appreciated the theology, even though that these people own slaves. We've accepted that. We're just saying sometimes we have a problem with certain things. And it started to become like, well, wait a minute. Like, what are you saying? Like, these people were men of their time. Then it became about, pastors like Jonathan Edwards and George Whitefield and people who supported slavery, right? It got into that because this is how it started. This is how it started. Because there were white theologians, white pastors with influence, evangelicals, kind of got offended at the song Precious Puritans, and it became this. Owen Strand was one of the main ones, right? Back then he was leading the Council of Biblical Manhood and Womanhood back then. He took over from Wayne Grudem. I'm telling you, I was there for all this. It was fascinating to look back on it. I will write a book, but people don't read no more. And so they were going back and forth. And so then, as it seemed like white Christians, evangelicals, theologians were unwilling, they were unable to see what these guys were saying. They took offense to the Puritans. And then it became about, see, y'all have the privilege. You have the ability to say, because you don't got to deal with it. You're the majority culture. And then all of a sudden, that whole thing became about white privilege. I'm talking about in the church. This was before CRT. This was before 2014 when Mike Brown got hit. This was before even Trayvon Martin, I think. I think Trayvon Martin was 2012. This was before that. It started with this. And then Thabiti and Douglas Wilson went back and forth with Douglas Wilson's Black and Tan. And Thabiti was trying to say, hey, look, fam, we're not really banging with what you're saying in Black and Tan. You almost sound like you're saying slavery was good because black people got saved, but Christianity was in Africa a long time ago. In fact, your man, Augustine, is Northern African. Athanasius and Origen and all the church fathers, they was black, they was African. They was from Egypt and Northern Africa and Tunisia and all that, right? This. Mike Brown was breathing. Mike Brown was playing football when all this was happening. This was going on in the church, and it became about sin and righteousness. And what it was what the black side, the Thabiti and them was trying to say, y'all boys is inconsistent. Because here's what happened. White theologians shot back. Well, how was that? Well, now you can't eat. Well, so what are we not supposed to say David was that? Because David committed adultery and now we can't. And listen, it wasn't sinful what they were saying. You didn't agree with it, but it wasn't sinful. It's a Romans 14 issue, right? But it didn't become that. It started going back and forth. Well, what are you saying now? And it was like, well, first of all, fam, David actually repented of adultery, and he didn't teach that other men should commit the same sin that he did. So let's not use that example. But what happened was it became this back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, right? And then when Trayvon Martin got killed, right? People started to feel some type of way. But it wasn't until when Mike Brown got killed, that's when black Christians, not all, but some were expecting their white brothers to denounce that. Like people was feeling that. For whatever reason, Mike Brown became the new Rodney King, right? If you don't know about Rodney King, Google him, because I ain't going into it right now. All of a sudden, this was going back and forth, this was going back and forth, this was going back and forth. People was upset. It was arguing and all that. And then it became like, look, we need y'all to stand up and speak about this because we hurting with this. And then it became, well, we don't get involved in that type of stuff. That's the world, that's not the church. And then all of a sudden, then the white privilege came up and all of this came up. And then they shot back. Well, you're a social justice warrior. And it was really a misunderstanding. But what it was an inconsistency. It was what the black side felt like was, oh, so you'll say that Jonathan Edwards and George Whitefield and them are men of their times, but then you'll say people who support abortion, aren't they men of their times too? Like, how you going to say something that was as grotesque as that? It became all this back and forth. What the black people were trying to say was y'all are inconsistent. But what it became was white supremacy, white privilege. It became all these things, and the enemy just used it. Because black people, really what it was, we were just hurt. We was hurt that white people that we've been to seminary with y'all, we've been at conferences with y'all. Listen, I was at T4G 2006. It was a few black people in that joint. I kid you not. It wasn't that many. It was about 8,000 dudes in there, and I was in there like this. I looked around the auditorium, and I was like, looking for black people. It's like 1, 2, 3. I mean, we was looking for them, right? That whole conference, me, Thabiti, and my colleague, Mike Dixon, we spent the whole conference together. That was 06. 2 years later, Thabiti's on the stage, the only black dude up there, right? And so it just became this thing like, hey, we've been in your culture. We've read the books y'all said read. All we saying is this. And then there was basically what they were saying is, man, you're inconsistent. You're going to say that this isn't sinful, but you're going to say us even bringing up race is, and it just blew up. Blew up. Oh, you'll critique the black church, but we can't critique the white. It just blew up. It blew up. And I watched this thing play out, and I was behind the scenes trying to hold people together. I lost friends. I had dudes that I was cool with. The BD and all unfollow me. Like, man, I ain't even talk, man, I can't. Because I was trying to be like, brothers, we got to stay balanced. This is a crazy joint right now. And let me tell you what happened. So on the white side, there was pushback. It was like, no, you're a social justice warrior. Then it was you're a cultural Marxist. And then it became you're woke. And woke became the catch-all term. By the time we got to 2017 and Trump won, it was like, you're woke. Now it became white supremacists. Remember Shaolin? Really white evangelicals? It became all, then it was like even more so. And I get it. White evangelicals felt attacked. It was like, oh, they weren't racist. They just didn't process it. When you're the majority culture, right? You don't see things from a different point of view. Ain't no shame in that. If you go to an all-black church, right, or you live in an all-black neighborhood, they ain't gonna, man, you go to an all-black church, they not gonna be playing no Chris Tomlin. It's a good song. You're a good father. It's who you are. They're not playing that in that. And if they do, it got a rhythm that you can't hit. But you a good father. They're not doing that. Whenever you go to a Latino church, they ain't gonna be like, hey, let's slow it down and play the Anglo-Saxon music. No, they're gonna be like, they're gonna be Marcos Witt with it. You know what I'm saying? Oh, Dios. They're not doing that, right? They got offended. So white people was like, whoa. Wait a minute, fam. I'm not a racist. So now I gotta agree with everything you're saying to not be a racist. But they were like, that's inconsistent, right? There was an inconsistency epidemic. And everything boiled down to, it was just sin of righteousness. That's what it was. It was this inconsistency epidemic. It came from sin of righteousness. And then it got political after Trump. So listen, man, white evangelicals didn't vote for Trump because they were racist. They voted for Trump because in 2015, gay marriage passed. 2016, Obama was suing school systems if they would not allow people who identify with the opposite gender to use the bathrooms. It was like, hold up, fam. We're still processing gay marriage. And now the T of the LGBT, it became all caps. Everything became about, we got to serve. And so people, white evangelicals felt like, hold on, fam. And here's the reality. White people tend to value America differently than black people because we have a history that white people don't have in America. You know, this is why they always read Frederick Douglass's What's July 4th to the Negro, right? But it's not those white people's fault. It's just the history, and that history has consequences, right? So all of a sudden, you had the white people, whoa, white event, and I'm making it black and white for a reason. I'm not, obviously it was a lot going on. I'm not trying to be racist. Why are you talking about race? Because it's my channel, fam. But this is what happened, right? So they were going back and forth, and white evangelicals was like, hold on, they didn't vote for Trump because they were racist. They voted for Trump because they didn't want the Democrats to force them to submit to a sexual ethic they don't get. And Trump was like, look, I ain't no politician. Trump was like, I'm not no politician. And that's what it was. White evangelical. But then all of a sudden, but by then the narrative was white supremacy, right? Great white privilege. And so you had white Christians that were like, fam, I know a dude who had black kids that he adopted and somehow it became colonization. Huh? This dude, you didn't adopt these black kids and it became he's a colonizer? No, what are we doing? And the enemy was using it. And primarily it was because everything was either sin or righteousness. It wasn't Romans 14. I just think a little bit differently about this. White people got offended when black people brought up race because we don't want to hear about what we did. And then black people got offended that you don't want to hear about race because you still benefit from it. And it just became boom. So then all of a sudden, 2017, now Trump is in there. White evangelicals, 80% of them voted for Trump, proving their white supremacy. No, they didn't want a sexual ethic to destroy what they believe in. And I'm with them. I don't agree with that sexual ethic, right? So I was watching this play out like, wow, this is crazy. And Trump didn't add to it. I mean, of course, Trump didn't. Trump's a bull in the China closet, right? It was ridiculous. And a lot of it was just, you just are inconsistent. It's not sinful to talk about race. It's not sinful to have struggles with law enforcement and see things through that lens. But everything became about facts don't care about your. You're just woke and this is, and you're just white supremacy. And then I watched solid brothers and sisters just break. And the whole time I was like, Lord, help me stay balanced. I do not want to sin again. And my church is diverse. I'm unapologetically black. But I got white, Asian, Latino, black, and a couple other ethnics in my church, and a couple hundred people every Sunday. I can't get up there and be like, white people need to listen up. I'm an equal opportunity offender. If I had if I critique black culture, black people got mad. If I critique white culture, if I didn't say Democrats, if you vote Democrats, you're going to hell. If I didn't say if you vote Republican, it was crazy. I'm surprised I'm still a pastor, because a lot of pastors couldn't get out of 2020 because you had to be a pastor, you had to be a epidemiologist. You had to know, should we get the jab or not? Should we open the church or not? Should we wear face masks? You had to be a conspiracy theorist. COVID is a conspiracy. You had to believe, do you support Candace Owens or do you not? It was insane. And all of this that happened was largely because the categories of biblical evaluation. It was just sin or righteousness, and it produced an inconsistency epidemic. And we still live it to this day. We're Christians. And this is why I love that the Lord exposed the left. I loved it. I appreciated every bit of it, because I don't trust nobody but him. I'll submit to the governing authorities because he said that, but I don't trust none of them. I couldn't stand the leaders of Black Lives Matter from a standpoint of they took a genuine struggle that people had, created a clever slogan, but then had a different agenda, and then proved to be false prophets. PROFITS, prophets, right? That was it. But that's not the only thing God was exposing. I told everybody, the right's turn is coming. The right's turn is coming. You saw it on January 6th. Oh, you've been talking about Black Lives Matter all this time, but you did. It was funny. It was like this. When CRT came out, this is what I mean about inconsistency, right? I'm going to say this and then I'm done, because I'm going to see Superman with my boys in a little bit. And y'all probably getting tired of this. Some people are like, why is he talking about race? Because I don't feel like running, so I'd rather talk about skin color. I'm not running a race. All right? But look, when all this stuff started to happen, right? I was watching just watching everything go back and forth. And I was making music at the time, trying to address it. I did an album called C4, hashtag SEE4. So it's everywhere. I did that after having been gone and then I did an album called The Appendix, which I tried to explain how we got to this fever pitch moment, why black people feel this way, why white people feel this way. I worked really hard. It was an albumentary where I did an album/documentary on one thing. It was really fun to do. It was a lot of work, but I was very grateful for all of that, right? But here was the inconsistency thing. When CRT, when some of the Christians on the left, we'll just say left right now, they started quoting using CRT language like Marxist. That's what you're a Marxist. You're a cultural Marxist. I never knew who Marx was. You know who I thought Marx was when they first started? When I was a kid, they were like these fake Three Stooges called the Marx Brothers, Groucho Marx and Curly Marx and all. I thought they were calling me one of them. They were calling people that. I wasn't called that because I wasn't advocating for nothing. Eventually, once you say something like, who'd you vote for? Oh yeah, it was like, wow, how did we get so political? Because it became sin. If you don't vote this way, you're sinful, right? It just was crazy. But when they were calling people Marxists, cultural Marxists, and all this was happening, a lot of black people had no idea they didn't know who you talking about. On the left, they was like, who you talking about, Marx? Then we looked it up. It was like, ain't nobody talking about Marx, right? They were just saying here's what the thing was though. Karl Marx had some accurate observations. He just had horrible, horrible solutions, right? They weren't able to see that. They thought even the observations were sinful. They didn't think like, hey, I wouldn't use that. So then they started calling you a social justice. You're a Marxist. Then you became woke, and everything you said became about using. They were saying that's not biblical. Those are cultural definitions of justice and Marxism and all this stuff, right? They were saying all of it, right? One side was saying all of this stuff, saying the left is using unbiblical language, all of it, using Ta-Nehisi Coates and all these people. But then the right would be thrown in your face. Look, do you agree with Candace Owens? Candace Owens is a Catholic, but she wasn't saying she was Catholic back then. And then the right was holding up Thomas Sowell as if he's the Moses of the conservative party. Everything Thomas Sowell said, right? They were misusing facts like black people commit the most crimes in America, that 13% of the population. Man, it just got crazy. Because, and then all of a sudden now the right is now doing the same thing that the leftists, they're accusing the leftists doing. It was inconsistent. Oh, so when we quote from an article that's not a Christian, you say we're woke and it's this, but then y'all give us Thomas Sowell, y'all throw us his stats, y'all give us Candace Owens, y'all give us, Larry Elder, y'all give us this. It's just like, these people aren't professing believers. Thomas Sowell, as far as I know, he ain't no Christian. If he is, I never heard him say it, right? So it was like, and then all of a sudden the right started being like, well, you're gaslighting us. You're narcissist. You're, and it was like, fam, what does that mean though? Why are you using those terms? Why were Christians even using those terms? And it was, everybody was doing it. Everyone was using secular terms and accusing the other of being secular. I can't make this stuff up. You know it, you saw it. People still do it. Everyone was saying, you're just secularized. That's not biblical. What Bible passage talks about gaslighting? If you say, hey, you're gaslighting me, what verse is that so I can apply it and repent of it? How do you repent of being woke? What does that mean? Gaslighting. What is it? Use biblical terms, fam. If you think I'm lying, right? If you think I'm showing favoritism, if you think say that. Don't tell me I'm woke. You think I'm manipulating you? You think what? It was insane. And it just grew and grew and grew. And then it became this political fervor that we have right now. Whoever you support, and this is why I love the Lord and what he's doing and why I use Ephesians 5:11 almost every time I do a video, because the Lord exposes the deeds of darkness. Now the conservatives are feeling it. They got MAGA. I'm talking about diehard MAGA fans are angry at Pam Bondi and the DOJ, and now Trump saying that the Epstein stuff, his files are sitting on my desk. There's no file. They're all saying he must be in it. Elon Musk splits the party, talking about I'm creating a new party. Even the Dems didn't do that. Listen, let's be clear. I thought Joe Biden was a terrible president, if for no other reason, because my grandfather had Alzheimer's. I saw the signs. I watched it happen. This dude, Joe Biden, was sniffing little girls' hairs and didn't know which way to walk off a podium, right? But he wasn't lying and doing some of the stuff that this administration is doing. He wasn't breaking the law. They focused on his son being on drugs and having a laptop. But like half of Trump's advisors are felons. Trump is a felon, right? Oh, those are trumped up charges. You know how many dudes I know that would say those were trumped up charges, but they can't vote. But you get what I'm saying? There's an inconsistency and the Lord is exposing it. So I don't know what's going to happen. My confidence is not in any of it. And this is why I make videos, because yours shouldn't be either. If you are a believer, mark my words. In Revelation 7, when it talks about those who are around the throne, every tribe, tongue, nation, and all people, best believe every political affiliation will be in heaven. Don't make things just sin or righteousness. Is it lawful or beneficial? It may not be sinful, but it might not be building people up, right? It might not be beneficial to do that, fam. Wisdom or foolish? That might be unwise, bro. It might be unwise to do that. It's not a good thing. I don't know if I would do that. That's unwise, right? Maturity versus, listen, Romans 14. There are things that I'm more mature than other people with, but I'm not gonna put that around them. If I'm with somebody hanging out and they struggle, I don't drink alcohol just because that's not really my thing. But let's just say I'm hanging out with a guy and I decide I want to get a rum and coke. Let's just say I'm just, let me get a rum and coke. And he's like, oh man, yeah, I'm not gonna drink, man. I come from a background of alcoholism in my family and stuff like that. I'm not gonna drink. I'm not gonna be like, all right, well, cool, man. I'm gonna have one. You sure? All right, well, no. I'm gonna be like, you know what? Let me get a water. Let me get a sweet tea. Do y'all use Splenda or is it real? Is it real sugar? All right. I know I don't need the sugar, but if I'm gonna drink it, I want the real, right? I'm not gonna be like I'm gonna drink it because that's what Romans 14 is saying. I don't want to influence him because that's where he is. I may be mature enough to realize ain't no sin in that. And this is what Eric Mason was getting at. So when I watched the video, I enjoyed it. But the whole go to the 29 minute 20 seconds and look up the picking and choosing part. I think that phraseology and what I just described has been what Satan did to deceive the church. And for the last 14 or so years, this is where we're at. We're still here. We're still here. Still right here. People are still offended. But now the Lord is saying, I ain't with none of it. All the conservatives like, yeah, he's going to destroy the left, watch. And then when Patrice Cullors and them got exposed for buying mansions and all that, I told you, Kenneth, so I told you. And all of a sudden, Tucker Carlson leaves. He's beefing with Fox News of all places. Fox News. I'm going to start my own network, right? Candace Owens leaves Daily Wire because of her position on Israel. And now she's a thorn in their flesh, right? She was a thorn in black people. Now she's a thorn in their flesh. And now you look at the political party. You let a South African dude come because he's a billionaire and seemingly gave money to your campaign. And now you're talking about, we might have to deport the dude and look at it. Why didn't you think about looking at his status before you let him run Doge? The Lord is not playing. The Lord is exposing all of it. So you be offended if you want. You shouldn't be. I'm just trying to put you hip. I don't have any political affiliation. I'm not joining the American Party. My Constitution is the Bible, 66 books. I will submit to the laws of the land, but I will not elevate the men who make those laws ever. And people say, well, I don't elevate them. I just vote for them. Here's how you know you do. If your political affiliation or a policy tempts you to sin against other people, to gossip, slander, be angry, bitter, resentful, unloving, right? Rude, insisting on your own way, keeping a record of wrong. If it forces you to do that, you're worshiping man. Because there's no Bible passage that says you are exempt from loving your neighbor. You're exempt from being kind, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, self-control. There's no Bible passage that says when you are reviled, if they disagree with you politically, you can revile in return. You are reviled when you're reviled, or when you don't like what somebody says, when you disagree with them, you're allowed to go in the comment section and insult them. There's no Bible passage that says that. So if you do stuff like that, you may think, oh, I'm not worshiping man, but I think God would say that. Anytime we act opposite of what God requires, then we are more in that moment submitted to that thing than we are to God. If you don't believe it, you don't understand your Bible. And I'm not trying to be self-righteous because I failed in this too, but I am working very, very hard to not continue that failure because I've seen it destroy solid believers in the Lord. But what do I know? Now, I do want to get in the comment section, but not today because I'm taking my 3 dudes to go see Up and Away. And I'm going to do a video about that because everybody's already calling that joint woke. Well, not everybody. Some people are. Some people banging with it. But even that, we're so politicized. Everything is either sin or righteousness. Just say, fam, I didn't like it. And I'm a black preacher, so I always say I'm going to get ready to close, and I don't. Y'all already know that. Last thing I promise, because I got to go. Last thing. Here's what I do not understand. If you're married, you have conflicts with your spouse. 100%. You love your spouse, but there are times your spouse gets on your nerves. You have conflicts with your spouse. 100%. Can't deny it. If you have children, they will get on your nerves. They're going to tempt you. From babies to adults, they're going to get on your nerves. I love them 3 boys. But every once in a while, I just want to give a hard pluck. What happened, right? I get on their nerves. If you're a kid, your parents get on your nerves, right? And any other thing. People, you know what's wild? But people will get offended if you criticize the country, but no one ever says, why are you criticizing your spouse? Why are you criticizing your kids? Why do you disagree with God? No one says that. There are some people that are more offended if you criticize the country than if you criticize God. Make a couple coins. This is the culture we live in. So when people say, why are you criticizing it? Because I criticize a lot of things if I think there's a problem. Why are you criticizing me? It's just crazy to me, right? It's crazy when you think about it. You can't criticize the country, but you can criticize your spouse. You can criticize your children. You can criticize God. Why does a good God allow evil and suffering? But if you say something about the nation, you're unpatriotic. Go back to where you came from. Nobody ever says, "Well, give your kids in the public what's it, CPS." Then, if you complain about your kid, give them the CPS. Well, then give your wife up. Let her marry somebody else. If you complain, nobody talks like that. Nobody talks. Well, if you're complaining about God, all right, then. Well, then go worship another. Nobody complains like that. It's just fascinating to me. There's an idolatry that is so funny. And I'm talking about by Christians. I'm not talking about non-Christians. Well, believers are acting like God really cares more about the policies you stand for than the people you stand against. But what do I know? I'm just going to the movies with my kids. Real Talk is back. Kirk Kennedy's back. Long videos. The tape, all of it. Not this time because I'm going to the movies. But we back.